Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about how it is that our leaders, and I'm talking about Sunak and Hunt and also Starmer, how they all seem to be living in some sort of cloud cuckoo land, and how they all seem to think we're pretty stupid, I think, and how it's all going to end in tears for them, and well, it's obviously going to end in tears for us, the way things are going at the moment. Before I start, though, I would just like to share with you a comment I received to last week's video, which went as follows. It's from a guy called Michael West, and Michael says, he says, "Fellow, you are no good at producers' videos, so do not try again." And then in capitals he says, "Yes, I understand that this Tory party is ruining Britain, even though you Arexa Tiri party member. Get to the point, fellow. You are not a good presenter." Presenter he spells wrongly. Although he's called Michael White, I'm assuming English isn't his first language, but nevertheless, thank you, Michael, if you're watching, and thank you for watching last week, and I hope you subscribe. And well, I'll do my best to present better this time, or maybe I'll have to give up. So I've just been looking at what Sunak has been saying lately, what Jeremy Hunt has been saying also in an interview with Beth Rigby, and also I had a very good look at what Keir Starmer said to the CBI in his speech last week. Now, Sunak, as we all know, he's terrified of the ERG, the crazy right-wingers at the back of the class, who are just troublemakers, and he seems to be frightened of them, and he won't do anything that isn't going to, or he won't do anything that's going to upset them in any way at all, and that obviously restricts him a great deal. And he said, I think before last, he was going through all the benefits of Brexit and so on, what a wonderful thing it was, wasn't he? He said we ended freedom of movement, huge cheers, everybody's extremely pleased about ending freedom of movement. And I thought to myself, they're celebrating this. This is the freedom of movement. This is the freedom to go and start a business in the EU. It's the freedom to go and do business in the EU. Freedom to go and live in any one of 27 other countries. The freedom for our children and our children's children and generations to come to be able to go and study in universities in all over Europe. All those freedoms have gone. Freedom to go through the EU channel when you arrive in the EU instead of having to queue up for hours on end. All those freedoms, they're all gone. And they're cheering it. This is great success. And someone said, what was the greatest priority for the government at the moment? And when you look around, you see the crisis in the economy. You see the cost of living crisis, prices going through the roof. You see all the strikes and so on. You can see the chaos. You can see the state of the National Health Service. You can see the state of the police and everything else. Everything is absolute chaos. You can see the country's falling apart. And what's this, the government's number one priority? I'm quoting his words. The government's number one priority is stopping people coming here illegally in small boats across the channel. And that's it, isn't it? It's just something it's easy to get all worked up about that. All these right-wingers get really worked up about it. Now, there was a Home Affairs Select Committee meeting last week at which Suella Braverman appeared. And she was asked by a Tory MP, Tim Loughton, she was asked, supposing I was a 16-year-old boy in Africa and I wanted to come to the UK, and I had a sister in the UK living here, and I was trying to escape persecution or whatever, and I don't know, whatever, his life was at risk and so on, how would I do it? And it was perfectly clear from her answer, there is no way, there is no possibility. If you're not from one of a number of named countries, you've got no possibility of coming to the UK to seek asylum. She then went on to say, well, if you arrived, coming across the channel, if you arrived in a boat, then you could claim asylum. And he said, well, I couldn't come here legally. I couldn't come here. I'd be doing it illegally, wouldn't I, if I came across in a boat? And she had no answer for it. In the end, she said, well, I'll have to ask my officials, and they didn't have any answer either, because the fact of the matter is, we've shut the borders, and that is why we've got so many people coming across in the boats. And having established that this is a route that works, we've now got all these Albanians and all the rest of it coming across, who many of whom probably are not seeking asylum, they're looking for economic advantage. So the whole asylum system, which the government is obsessed with, is a disaster. But if you look at the latest figures that were only published last week, I think the highest number ever in the last year have come to this country, and there are very good reasons for that. 100,000 Ukrainians, there are a load of people from Hong Kong and so on, and half the figures are students anyway. But what is significant in the figures that were published is that the migration from the EU is now negative. In other words, there are more Europeans going home to the EU than actually coming here. In other words, it's been a great success. I mean, all those people that used to come here and used to pick our vegetables, and used to work in the abattoirs, used to drive lorries and work in construction and hospitality and all these other things, all these people where we've got vacancies now we're desperate for, we got rid of all of them. All EU people, they've all gone back. So they can't come here and undercut us with cheap labour. That's one of the lines, isn't it? We've been hearing a lot. It's cheap labour coming in undercutting us. Someone comes from Romania to pick apples. They get paid minimum wage. English person coming to pick apples, paid minimum wage, but they're undercutting us. Yes, cheap labour, taking our jobs. But the Labour Party, they've got a plan for this. They've got a really good plan. It was explained last week. It's rather interesting, actually. What they say, you see, the situation at the moment. Supposing I've got some orchards and I want some people to pick apples. I can't find anybody in the UK to pick apples, so I have to get somebody from, from somewhere else. Let's say from Romania. So I have to find somebody first. So I have to advertise in Romania for someone to do it, and then I presume they have a Zoom interview or something. Right? Anyway, I eventually pick somebody who can come and pick apples. When they get here, they have to pay £750 for a visa, and they have to pay £750 for health insurance, and then they have to show they've got £1,200 in the bank so that they can actually survive until they get their first paycheck. So when they've gone through all that and they get here, I, as an employer, I have to be, or before I can actually get anybody, I have to be licensed. And then I have to undertake, according to the Labour Party's new proposal, I have to undertake to train British people to do the jobs I'm getting the Romanians to do. So if I get 10 Romanians come and pick apples, I've then got to agree to train 10 English people to pick apples so that the Romanians didn't come the next year. Do you see how it works? It's quite clever, really. And the fact that I can't find the English people to pick apples, well, that's a bit of a snag. The fact that people don't want to pick apples in this country, it's a bit of a snag, but otherwise that's the Labour Party's solution to keeping out foreigners, because they're as keen to keep out foreigners as the Conservatives are. In fact, Nigel Farage, said last week that he thought the Labour Party immigration policy was to the right of the Conservatives, and it was almost exactly the same as UKIP immigration policy. So we're moving on nicely. Now, Jeremy Hunt last week gave an interview to Beth Rigby from Sky. She's a terrific interviewer. She wanted to talk about Brexit, but Hunt didn't want to. And she pressed him on it and asked him what the advantages were and all the rest of it. And she pointed out that the OBR had said that as a result of Brexit, direct result of Brexit, our economy would shrink by 4%. Hunt's response was, I don't accept the 4%. And he said the reason he didn't accept it because it was absent other changes. He used this expression a couple of times, absent other changes. In other words, the OBR have taken all the current figures, they've made an assessment of what's happening already, and they've calculated that it will shrink the economy by 4%. He says he doesn't accept that, absent other changes. And then, having said he didn't accept the OBR's figure, he then went on, and I'm going to quote this for you. This is what he said. In the next sentence, the OBR says that inflation is going to halve and then go down to zero within the next 2 to 3 years. They say growth the other side will be between 2 and 3% for the following 3 years. And then he goes on about high skill, high wage, and Silicon Valley. So he doesn't accept the OBR's calculation that our economy is going to shrink by 4%, but he accepts their estimates of what is going to happen in terms of inflation, growth in 6 years' time, 5 or 6 years' time. And I mean, how stupid do these people think we are? And then again, he goes on about Silicon Valley. I mean, I was going to talk about this last week, and I didn't really think it was even worth wasting breath on. To be perfectly honest, it's so stupid. It's just so absurd. Silicon Valley is the name we give to the group of massive companies that were created and have been created in the last 20, 30 years in America. Talking about Amazon and Google and Apple and Facebook and so on. And he wants to do the same here. So they can do it, we can do it. And the Chinese, there's something called STEM in terms of academics. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It was the sort of people that group encompasses computer students and so on. China is producing 2.5 million STEM graduates every year. India's producing 1.5 million every year. America produces 500,000 every year. I don't know how many we produce. It's probably 50,000, but anyway, whatever it is. The idea of setting up a Silicon Valley here. It's good to go for tech. Of course we should go for tech. Everybody should go for tech. The whole world is going for high tech and IT and all the rest of it. But talking about Silicon Valley, who does he think he's fooling? How dare he insult our intelligence with this drivel? And then he got, Beth Rigby carried on, and he got quite irritated that she continued to persist asking about Brexit. And then when it comes to the advantages of Brexit, I mean, we all know the disadvantages. We all see that the economy is collapsing. We can all see what's going wrong. Of course, it's nothing to do with Brexit. Nothing. The fact that we're forecast to be the first in and the last out of the recession, the fact that we're the only country that hasn't built our economy up to pre-pandemic levels yet, the fact that we're forecast to be the 19th slowest growing out of 20 economies next year by the OECD, the fact that the OBR says that our economy is going to shrink by 4%, etc., etc., the fact that all the ratings agencies are reducing our credit standing all the time, that has nothing to do with Brexit. Nothing to do with Brexit. It's all to do with coronavirus, which affected everybody. It's all to do with the Putin's war in Ukraine, which affected most people. And it's all to do with the last Labour government. Nothing to do with it. When asked about the benefits of Brexit, last week, Michael Gove was on the Today programme, and he was asked what Nick Robinson said to him, can you tell us any benefits for business in Brexit? How has it helped business? And he said, yes. He said, well, we've left the common agricultural policy, which means that farmers are now free to clean up our rivers. That's what he said. The rivers that we're now allowing water companies, because they're no longer restricted by the EU, water companies to tip in millions and millions and millions of gallons of sewage all the time. And that's an advantage. See, before when we were in the EU, farmers couldn't clean up the rivers. No. It's like Jeremy Hunt had said that having left Brexit, it gives us an advantage to build up our skills, invest in skills. We couldn't do that when we were in the EU, couldn't invest in skills in the EU. Oh no, it's only now. There's a Tory politician called, what's his name? He's called Andrew Griffiths. I think he's the economic secretary to the Treasury. And he's one of these guys who's extremely pleased with himself. Really, I think the word cocky is the word. He's the guy at the golf club who'd talk louder than everybody else, saying how well he'd played and how good he was and so on. He must spend an awful lot of time in front of his mirror, I'd imagine. Just loves himself. And he got his little chance to answer some questions in Parliament last week. And someone said to him, could you please list some of the advantages of Brexit? And he responded, this is the government minister, he responded, there just isn't time. There's just too many. Now, everybody knows there aren't any. Everybody knows that he was being sarcastic. So you have here a government minister being sarcastic about the fact that Brexit is a complete and utter and absolute disaster. And also you see already Tory members of Parliament, particularly younger ones, saying they're not going to stand again. They're all deserting this sinking ship. The whole thing is toxic. And if you're particularly these 4 MPs last week who said they're not going to stand again, I mean, if everything was going well, you'd stand again. Why wouldn't you? But no, they're all going to go off and do other things because they don't want to be associated with this government. And when you think someone like Kwarteng, for example, I mean, where is he ever going to get a job again? You imagine him going to a big city boardroom and saying, I want a job, and they'll say, oh, yeah, you're the guy that crashed the economy. All these MPs now, when they're trying to get jobs, ordinarily when you stop being an MP, you can go and get a job or working for a big company, whatever. They're all toxic, so they're getting out, and it's all Brexit. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Keir Starmer's speech to the CBI last week, and I want to quote a little bit from what he said, just to give you some idea of how he is as deluded, if not more deluded, than the Tories about our present situation and how to get out of it. And I think it does seem, in the first place, I think I'd like to say that it seems that the Tories and the Labour are so close together now on all these policies, and that the Labour Party is really just following on behind the Tories, because in the case of the Tories, Sunak knows that he has to keep the crazies on the backbenches happy. The xenophobes, the old men who are soon be retiring, who are all quite well off, all quite comfortably off, and haven't got to worry about anything but just hate foreigners, especially Europeans. And then, of course, Starmer's worried about the people in the red wall seats. Now, let me just say something about the people in the red wall seats, because this is his worry. Originally, 52% voted of those who voted for Brexit. Now, the number of people who are, according to YouGov, who do I think it's a daily or a weekly poll, according to YouGov, the figure of people who think that Brexit was a good idea is now down to 32%. Now, supposing quite a lot of those, as is also the case, a lot of them would have been Tories. So say half of them were Tories. So just 16% of Labour voters still think that Brexit was a good idea. That little 16% of the population, they're the ones that Keir Starmer is basing all his policies on, because he's got to please them in case they might go and vote Tory again. These are people, mostly red wall seats, probably not very well off. People are probably sat around in their overcoats eating cold baked beans out of a tin in the depth of winter, or queuing at food banks. But they might vote Tory again for more. So he's got to keep them happy. So their bigoted views about foreigners and about keeping out about inflation and so on, not inflation, immigration and so on. They're the views he's got to keep foremost all the time. That's how he's basing Labour Party policy on. Looking after those people, not upsetting them. Now, let me just tell you some of the things he said to the CBI. He's identified how we become successful. He didn't actually mention Silicon Valley. I suppose he would have done if Jeremy Hunt hadn't already nicked the idea. And he says we need increased business investment. That's a good idea. I never thought of that. We need better capital stock and improved infrastructure. You see, the Tories never think of this. Never ever think of wanting more business investment or improved. This is revolutionary. We need to embrace new technology. Who doesn't? And then he says this he supports, he's right behind Brexit. He's right behind, he supports everything about it. He thinks it's terrific that we've taken back control and that we managed to stop immigration and so on. He's dead against immigration, and the fact that we've lost 100 billion in exports to the EU. Oh, sure, fine with Keir. He says we need to lift our export performance. See, need to export some more. I don't know if he's taking into account that deal with New Zealand, where we're going to buy some We're going to sell them something, I don't know what, in return for that land that they're going to send us. And he says we need cities outside the southeast to become economic powerhouses. What is all this garbage? What is he talking about? Economic powerhouse. What's an economic powerhouse? Have we got any economic powerhouses? I mean, is Guildford, is that an economic powerhouse, or Plymouth? Northampton, the economic powerhouse? What is an economic powerhouse? But we need lots of them anyway. Then he goes on about training and investment, and so on. He's absolutely right. We do need to train. We do need to train and technicians and IT people as well. He also says, in my view, we don't value technical and vocational skills nearly enough. So it's no wonder that this country does much worse in computer skills than our economic rivals. I think you should tell Jeremy that, because Jeremy's going to get, he wants all these, the Basingstoke, Silicon Valley. And then he says, we've got a policy for startups. We would create 100,000 new businesses over the next 5 years by boosting the startup loan scheme. See, he's not a businessman. He's never had any experience of business. He's a lawyer. And nobody on the front bench, as far as I can see, of the Labour Party has any experience in business whatsoever. So all this stuff is just stuff they don't understand, stuff that is just meaningless drivel. We're in a mess. This isn't going to get out of the mess. Creating 100,000 new businesses. People will create businesses if they see opportunity. There's no opportunity at the moment. If you do create a business and you do quite well, okay, you can supply in the UK. You can't export because our nearest export market, the obvious market to go to, as I did when I started my business, started a business, I got doing quite well in the UK. One day I got in the car and take my samples over to Paris. Next thing I'm supplying in France, and then it's been Holland and Belgium and Spain and so on. Can't do any of that. There's no future for that. So who's going to start a business right now? You'd have to be absolutely mad. And he says they're going to do it by boosting the startup loan scheme. This startup loan scheme, when you start a business, it's really, really difficult. And you have to, you're risking whatever you've got. You're risking your own money. You've probably borrowed some money from some friends. You might have got a mortgage. If you've got a house, you might have raised a bit of money on the house. You might have got a bank loan and so on. But you raise all this money and you take this risk, and things never really quite work out. Most businesses fail, but it's always much more difficult than you expect, and you never become successful very quickly. It's lots and lots and lots of hard work and sleepless nights and so on. And so the government have this scheme, it's called Startup Loan Scheme, and so you can go along to them, they'll lend some money for starting a business. And as is quite possible, your business goes under. You go to the bank, say, look, I'm sorry, the business, I just couldn't make it. And the bank will say, well, okay, have you got nothing? You say, I haven't really got nothing. So they'll say, okay, fine. And they generally write it off because they're perfectly realistic, and they're making plenty of money anyway, and they allow for the fact that some loans are not going to get paid, particularly business loans. Startup government loan scheme, and I know this because I know somebody who actually did this and had this experience. If you fail to pay back that government loan, they put it on your credit record, your personal record, because you had to guarantee this, personally guarantee this loan. So on top of all the other risks and all the other hardship and disappointment of your business failing that you've put everything into, that probably your family have suffered to build and so on top of everything else, you've got a bad credit record for at least the next 7 years. You can't get any loans, you can't get any credit cards, you can't even get a telephone contract. So my advice to anybody who started to think of starting a business, don't. You're very, very unlikely in the present climate to have any chance of succeeding. And don't, under any circumstances, take any business loan from the government, because you're taking a huge, huge risk. Then he goes on. Our buy, make and sell more in Britain policy will weigh not just the cost and quality of a contract, but also the value it brings to our communities. You see, this is it. We have to try and make... there is a policy, it's a well-known policy, it's called Juche. They practice it in North Korea. Make everything here. Don't import stuff. don't import stuff. The reason we import stuff is because it's cheaper, or it's better made, or it's made by people who specialise in doing those particular things. This is one of the great advantages of having a world in which there are all sorts of different people with all sorts of different skills in all sorts of different places. It's why we don't try to grow pineapples here. We buy it from somewhere where they grow pineapples because the weather allows them to do so very easily. It makes sense. But no, we want to make as much as we can here. We haven't done any manufacturing for a very, very, very long time. When we were manufacturers, we weren't very good at it. Back, when I was very young, and we were making cars here. We were notoriously poor quality, and our manufacturing was an absolute disaster. But that's what we want to go back for. We want to make more, which we want to deal with foreigners, especially Europeans. And if we can get rid of what's left of the European manufacturers here, we're going to manufacture as much as we can here, juche. And he says, that's how we will remake Britain. What we need now is a sector-by-sector plan for the car industry. It's difficult to say that with a straight face. He wants Starmer, when he becomes Prime Minister, he wants a sector-by-sector plan for the car industry. The car industry is owned by Indians, by Japanese, and by Germans. There are virtually no, apart from tiny brands that very few people drive, there are almost no cars being manufactured in this country that are British made. And yet he can have a plan to reorganise them. And the steel industry, he was going to organise the steel industry. The whole steel industry is owned by Chinese and Indians. He's going to have a plan to reorganise all that. I mean, it's just pie in the sky, isn't it? We have thrown away this huge market, 100 billion, which is shrinking. We've lost it, which is the loss is increasing all the time. And they just come up with this drivel, increase exports. What does he say? He says, lift our export performance. Create a Silicon Valley. Sector-by-sector plan for the steel industry, the motor industry. What are they talking about? And as long as we go on with this nonsense, this deluded, pie-in-the-sky, la-la land thinking, and we're just going to get worse and worse and worse. I mean, there's no prospect of us improving our economy until we start getting closer to Europe, the biggest, richest, most successful market in the world, 22 miles away. And until we stop saying they are the enemy, we don't want anything to do with them, we don't want them coming here working, we don't want to go there, and we don't do any business with them. And the government now, aren't they? Changing standards as fast as possible, getting rid of all EU laws. They're infectious. Get rid of them all. Why? It's just so stupid and so tragic. And the fact that, as I said before, Sunak is being manipulated by a couple of dozen stupid, crazy, bigoted old men. And Starmer's worried about what now 16% are poor, deluded people who were conned 6 years ago into voting for Brexit or for voting Conservative. And they're directing all these policies. Everything has to be policies made for the Conservatives. The priority of pleasing these old men, and for the Labour it has to be pleasing these red wall voters, this tiny little proportion of the total electorate. Anyway, with that, if you've watched this far, thank you very much. I'll finish there. And, until next time, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.